Hey, what is up YouTube? Carl Vito here, and today we're going to be running Plaguefall, Mythic Plus, only a plus 8, but it's to give you guys kind of a sense of how the Unholy Death Knight works, the rotation, the talent, the consumables, and kind of the ins and outs and do's and don'ts that you would want to do in a dungeon as an Unholy Death Knight. So please, listen to the music and just sit back and watch. First things first, we're gonna get all of our consumables out of the way. So we got our food buff, our flask, our armor kits, our oils, our runes, or all that shit. I will not be putting on any armor kits or runes for this, just flasks, oils, and food buffs. For the talents, what you see on the screen is pretty much the setup for Unholy Death Knights. I know, it was a little too fast. Clawing Shadows or all will serve. Clawing Shadows is really good for AoE. Unholy Blight, Unholy Pact, and Army of the Damned are pretty much go-tos. You always want to use those. Death's Reach is just for like death gripping farther away adds. Wraith Walk is for another movement ability. So as we're here, we want to pop open our ghoul with Raise Dead. We want to use our Unholy Blight and our Dark Transformation and our Army of the Dead. So Dark Transformation and Army of the Dead together actually works like your God combo. Using those 2-bit abilities together will pretty much maximize your DPS. And you should always use those. Now the only problem is Army of the Dead's on like an 8-minute cooldown, so it's really hard to time when you want to use that. Whereas Dark Transformation's only on like a minute cooldown, so you'll have that up periodically throughout the dungeon. So the reason that we use Clawing Shadows in our talents is because instead of just attacking the same target, Clawing Shadows will actually let you hit multiple targets at once.
Interrupt.
I'll give you guys a good rundown when we get to the boss on how the rotation actually is gonna go. Unfortunately, we won't have Army of the Dead for the boss, which is kind of sad, but it's alright. Just trying to like quickly kill all these slimes so we don't need to worry about it.
Shockwave.
So the other talents that you could actually choose as Asphyxiate is like a CC. You can like crowd control an ad for like 10 seconds or something like that. Grip of the Dead, actually your death and decay that you put on the ground, this stuff, it will actually make ads move a lot slower. So for example, this boss spawns a bunch of oozes that if the ooze gets to the boss, it will heal the boss. Kind of like how it's doing with this little ad thing right now. Alright. So here we are at the boss. We're gonna pop our flesh. Oh, never mind. It didn't work. Usually you would use Army of the Dead with Dark Transformation and Unholy Blight for your first opener, but since I don't have it, I just pop Death and Decay, and then I just pop all my cooldowns and my Spectral Strength Potion. And then you're just gonna constantly be going back and forth between like 3 buttons. You're gonna be going with your Festering Strike, that builds up your runic power. It also builds up your runes that you're gonna be using. You have your Clawing Shadows that spends your runic power that you use. And then Death Coil. I'm sorry about that, guys. Actually, Clawing Shadows, Festering Strike, and Clawing Shadows both build runic power. Clawing Shadows pops your runes that you have. You have little tiny runes, like I think you can have a max of like 6 or 8 of them. Clawing Shadows will pop those, and that gives you like a DPS boost and whatnot. Death Coil, the little green ball that you shoot out, your little warlock move, that actually heals you at the same time. That's gonna be what spends your runic power. So you're pretty much just going back and forth, kind of like how most classes in WoW does. They have a resource like mana, energy, rage, and you have like a building move, a spending move, and then you might have like an extra move that does something else. And that's pretty much what we got here. We have Festering Strike to build up the runic power, Clawing Shadows to pop your runes, and then Death Coil to spend your runic power. But Vito, how do you know what to use between Festering Strike and Clawing Shadows? So, Festering Strike will actually put a dot on them as well. Clawing Shadows you will usually only want to use when you have runes available to pop. So a good way to manage this, which I would definitely recommend, is you see that little add-on in the middle of my screen between the nameplates that have 3 abilities and they keep changing. That add-on's called Heat-Killy, and it actually kind of tells you like what you should be using. Like right now it says I should pop my shield. And then it says I should apply my dot, I should spread my dot, and then my cooldowns. So it's constantly changing. So it's pretty much just keep spamming whatever that tells you what to push. It's an easy GG win button, I guess you can say. I think the easiest way to explain it to someone who doesn't have the add-on though is, so let's say you start off pull or a boss fight and you don't have, let's say you don't have any runic power at all. Like right now, I don't have any runic power right now. I would go into the fight and I would hit the Festering Strike like maybe 1 or 2 times. Make sure I don't cap at 100 runic power. Maybe hit like 50, 60, 70%. And then I would Clawing Shadow once. And then here's the general rule about Death Coil. Spending your runic power with Death Coil, you will usually always want to do it when you hit about 80%. You never want to hit max runic power, because you're pretty much just giving yourself a DPS loss at that point.
Wonderful! More test subjects! Unleash the plague borders!
So Vito, what cooldown do you have? So we already went over Army of the Dead. That's your long cooldown that you pair up with Dark Transformation to make your God mode. Unholy Blight spreads like your disease that you have across all targets. That's usually good to constantly be using as well. It's an easy spreader, especially if you're fighting a big pack of mobs. And then you have a couple other ones. Let me get out of the way right now. Alright. So you have Abomination Limb, which is the ability you get for being Necrolord, Covenant, and Shadowlands. Abomination Limb pulls all enemies towards you as long as they're able to be pulled. So, like, it doesn't work on bosses, but most ads, it will work on. Um, this is a love-hate ability, to be honest. It's an awesome ability that increases my DPS on trash pulls and whatnot, even during ad phases of boss fights, but at the same time, it can really fuck the group up. For example, there's a boss in the new raid Sepultura where if the random crystals that spawn gets the boss, it pretty much wipes the whole group. And your ability can actually pull them. So me being melee, I'm always on the boss, so I will never want to use that ability during that fight. We have our Orc Racial Blood Fury. So if anybody who plays an Orc gets this racial, it just increases your attack power. It's a tiny little buff. And then Lichborn, which it makes you become undead, which increases your leech, so your self-healing, but it also immunes you to like any type of charm if you're asleep. I do have a nasty habit of popping that just with all my other cooldowns, when in all honesty I should only use it situational. I'm a very impulsive person, so usually when I just pop cooldowns, I pop all the cooldowns just to see if I can maximize my DPS at anything. Another ability I have is the shield that I just put on. That's another Necrolord ability you get with your Covenant, Fleshcraft. It's just your standard shield. It increases absorption with damage. It's something you'll want to always pop. That's pretty standard. And then we have one other cooldown. We have Apocalypse. So Apocalypse actually lets you summon multiple ghouls and minions. So it's kind of like your Raised Dead, your ghoul that you constantly have with you, and your long Army of the Dead big cooldown. But it can be used for quite a while. It's only on like a 1.5 minute cooldown, so as you can see, we just started the boss fight. I just popped Apocalypse. It's telling me to constantly use Clawing Shadows. You might see a couple other abilities on there. The other abilities is Outbreak. Outbreak just puts your diseases on anybody, so that's kind of like a good opener if you start a fight.
Watch your
Just
step.
put it, hit the Outbreak to put the disease on whoever you're fighting. The other one is Epidemic. That will actually spread the disease. So if you pull a big mob of trash pulls, you can hit Outbreak with one of the guys and then hit Epidemic to spread it to everybody else. So Dark Transformation and Unholy Blight just popped up again, and I just used them again. So like I said, those are cooldowns that you're going to be able to use multiple times. Same thing with Apocalypse. I just summoned 4 different ghouls
Watch your step.
because Apocalypse came back up. Those are all cooldowns you're going to be able to use multiple times during a boss fight. And something tells me that we're actually going to wipe on this boss because nobody is attacking the ad that you're supposed to kill before he gets his cast off. So oh, I don't know how we didn't do that. So there you go. So I think we covered pretty much all the bases. We covered all your, we covered all the, like, offensive cooldowns. We have some defensive cooldowns that you'll want to use, and some utility ones as well. Went over all of our rotation pretty much. So festering, Falling Shadows wasn't up because I didn't have any runes to pop, so I used Death Coil instead. In a perfect world, you know, you'll never have to like sit there and not cast anything and wait for something to come up. But unfortunately, we don't live in a perfect world. You'll always, I mean, that's pretty much the point of playing a DPS class. You'll always want to just constantly be doing damage. If you have any type of downtime, then It just the DPS loss, and in all honesty, it kind of makes it to where you feel like maybe the class needs to have a little tuning to it. So I just popped Dark Transformation and Unholy Blight again, just as like a quick opening cooldown. Unholy Blight already spreads my disease on all targets, so I don't have to cast Outbreak on one and then Epidemic to spread it. I just realized there was one more ability I did not go over in my rotation, and it's actually a situational ability that's in your talents. Soul Reaper. 80... I would say 90% of the time you will always be speccing into this. The only time you will not probably never spec into it is if you're on a boss fight that the boss, like, the fight ends before the boss dies. Like, if the boss does not go below 50% health, then you won't want to use it, because that's where it requires. So I'll show you here on this little ad that we got going on. So let me just go ahead and do my damage. I'm also kind of rooted in place. Alright. So the ability, actually, I'm pretty sure... Where is it at? Right here. 35%. So if something goes below 35% health, it's considered an execute phase. That's when, like, certain classes like warriors and monks can use their execute abilities to instantly kill something. This is not an instant kill or an execute ability, but it does only work if the target's below 35% health. The reason I say, like, if a boss doesn't go below 50 is because in that 35 to 50 range, you're still not gonna want to use it. It's usually a good chance, like, if the boss goes below 50, there's a good chance it's gonna die. Like, there's no boss that I can think of that goes to, like, 10% or anything like that. So here I am, boss fight, popping all my cooldowns because I'm a goat. That's what I do. Summon everything I can. So we have a couple defensive abilities right now. The first one is Anti-Magic Zone. This is a raid-wide, group-wide defensive cooldown that will actually, like, help the raid by absorbing a bunch of stuff. During raids, it's a really good cooldown to use in those boss fights that have big AoE damage phases or something like that. So I'm just gonna pop it right here for you guys to see. So everybody just stands in the bubble. I'm not gonna lie, I'm getting really sick of having all this melee because it's just... The second one you're gonna want to use is like a personal version of that anti-magic zone. It's anti-magic. It's anti-magic shell, which is only like a minute cooldown, so you'll constantly be using this too. That is just a self-absorption shield as well. That's actually pretty good in boss fights too. Like, there's some boss fights where there will spawn like some traps or something, and if you touch them, you die. That will actually negate the traps and let you run through and get rid of them. So that's a really good cooldown to have, especially on a short cooldown. This is a trinket that I have, and the trinket just lets me recast my absorption shield by my covenant again. So that's a nice little cool trinket utility cooldown that I have. Right now I have 2 movement cooldowns. One is Death's Advance, which is a fantastic ability. It just gives you like a movement speed increase, but it also negates any type of movement impairing effects. So like if you're on a boss fight that does like a big knockback or something, you won't get knocked back. Any other type of movement negative type effects, same deal. It's amazing. I love it. And then the other movement effect I'm actually spec'd into, Wraith Walk. The other times, and we'll go over this at the end of the dungeon, but Wraith Walk is another cooldown that actually lets you take on like a ghostly form, removes any type of like shit that you have on your character, like debuffs or negative abilities, and you actually get to move for a short distance. It's just a nice little another movement utility that people can use just to kind of get places faster. You know, you have a lot of those boss fights where you have to like avoid a big laser beam or something, so it's good to have little abilities like that that will help you get out of that. And other than that, the only other, I mean, you have your basic class abilities like interrupt, and you have your basic death knight abilities like your death grip where you can grip ads. The only other defensive cooldown that we have is Icebound Fortitude, and that just granting you immunity to stun effects and reducing damage you take. So it's a nice little, especially during those what do you call it, big AoE phases again. It's nice to have that. Or like, for example, you just saw on the boss those tentacles that came down. If you get hit by those, it's usually an instant death, but maybe yeah, see. Ah, God. See, I'll show you Wraith Walk. It will let me actually move over. See? I'm sorry, guys. It's kind of really annoying having other melee in the group.
Killads.
Because since we're doing Mythic Plus, you have all those affixes that usually happen. Oh shit, I might die to this. Nope. Ooh. You have all those affixes that come with Mythic Plus. Let me show you guys here in a second. We have Tyrannical, Inspiring, Quaking, and Encrypted. Tyrannical just increases boss's health. I think damage too. Inspiring makes it to where if you fight a group of ads, there's an inspiring ad. That ad has to be the first one to die, because I think it heals or buffs the other ads while it's alive. And everyone's standing on top.
Watch your step.
Actually, hold on. Oh. Ooh. Kind of faked you out there. Did we even time that? Oh yeah, we plus 3'd it. That's hilarious. That's insane that we plus 3'd that. So plus 3 means that we beat the timer. Because Mythic Plus has a timer, we beat it by a lot. Because you can not time it and just complete it. Plus 1 it, which is like a couple minutes left on the clock. Plus 2 it, it's like 7 to 10 minutes, and then plus 3. You need to float? That fell. Alright. Oh, that was fun. And we'll go over the last few details right now that the dungeon is over. Yeah, like I said, that was insane that we plus 3'd it. I mean, it was a plus 8 dungeon, so the keystone was a plus 8, and you know, anything below 10 is usually pretty easy and casual to play. But at the same time, I was talking throughout the whole thing. I wasn't focusing on anything. Just mindlessly going through the dungeon, like still great on the timer. Only plus 15s could be like that. So for those of you that don't know, plus 15 is not the highest level dungeon you can do, but it's the highest peak for gear. So like once you hit 15, that's like the highest gear that drops. both from the dungeon and from your weekly Great Vault. After that, everything else, 16, 17, 18, so on, still drops that same gear that 15 does, but at the same time, it's harder. So just to go over a few other things, talents, like I said, you'll want to use either All Will Survive or Clawing Shadows. Clawing Shadows is if you know you're going to be facing a lot of trash mobs that have multiple ads in it, or a boss fight that might have like a second boss, mini boss that you have to cleave on. Other than that, if you're in like a boss fight in a raid that's just completely single target, just that one guy, all will serve you. Other than that, Unholy Blight's fantastic. It's what you're gonna always use. This one is your preference. We'll go through these. Reduces the speed that ads run or travel. Increases the range of how far you can grip an ad, and then lets you like stun and control. It's pretty much like a Darth Vader force choke. So this is all optional. The only time that you will change this one is if you're on a boss fight that does not go below 50% health. Because this Soul Reaper, you will constantly be using it on a boss or an ad that has less than 35% health. Technically, yes, if the fight ends at 50%, there's some bosses in the game that do that because they don't die, they just run away. You could still technically take this going up to the boss for all the trash because you can cast this on trash and then switch at the boss. The only other option that I would use would be this first one. If you burst a Festering Wound, which is those runes that you burst when you use Clawing Shadows, 10% chance will grant you Runic Corruption. Runic Corruption is just another, I wouldn't say dot because damage over time. I wouldn't even say hot because it's not healing over time. It's it's like a small little cooldown proc that you have that will increase Runic power. Unholy Pact and Army of the Damned will always be there for you. You will always use these. I mean, I'm not saying you can't try any of these other abilities out. If you want to go into a dungeon and try them out, be my guest. That's completely fine. I'm just kind of giving you what like the meta build is, like what provides the most utility, damage, like utmost time. The other optional one is this one. Wraithwalk is that extra movement speed ability, which is fantastic because Death Knights are the slowest class in the game. The only other time I would use something different is if I'm in a fight that doesn't require a lot of moving, and I'm usually roughly in the same area for the most part, but there may be a lot of AoE damage or something. Spell Eater actually grants my personal anti-magic shell, absorbs 30% more damage, and it lasts 5 seconds longer. So that is a fantastic survivability talent. So, other than that, guys, I mean, we went over like all the damaging cooldowns, the defensive cooldowns, the utility cooldowns. I mean, we have our random basic abilities to Death Grip pulls ads. Death Strike is another damaging ability, but it also heals you. It is more effective than Death Coil for the healing. That's why it's on my bars. So if I am noticing that I'm kind of dying a little bit, I might pop that. Chains of Ice actually like root somebody in place. That's why you might see like an ice gate around certain ads sometimes. I mean, other than that, everything else is pretty much just whatever. Like, I mean, I have a macro that just spams bursting now. That just tells my group when I'm popping all my cooldowns. For consumables, I use the Tenebrous Crown Roast Apple. It gives me haste for my food buff, unless the group is providing a feast. You will always take the feast over personal food if it's offered. potions, I use the Spectral Strength potion. So that's up, I think. It gives you a 25-second window of extra strength, and I think it's like a 2-minute cooldown that you can use another one. And then I have the Cosmic Healing Potion, which is obviously the highest healing potion you can get right now. I know there's a lot of debate right now on what to use for your weapon. I use Shadowcore Oil. It's been proven most effective in all scenarios with Death Knights. Other classes may use Sharpening Stones, which increases the attack power of a weapon. The Shadowcore Oil provides more benefit for the Death Knight. So, Flask, the Flask of Power is pretty much what the Flask, I think almost every class uses. It's just your generic, like, best Flask of all time. Can go over the character a little bit. On the weapon, I have the Rune of the Fallen Crusader. So most classes use enchants on their weapons. Death Knights do not. They have their own like profession called rune forging that actually lets them put special enchants on their weapons. Fallen Crusader is pretty much your go-to all the time with Unholy. It increases your strength and it gives you the chance to heal more. The only other time I would ever see myself using something different, I think I would have to look it up, but it's I want to say it might be Hysteria. I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, I'm not gonna force you to use something. If you want to try the other ones out, go for it. The other ones might be more beneficial in PvP or leveling or stuff like that. We'll run through the enchants, the gems, and the stats, and the legendaries. So first off, the legendaries. I have Cloak of the Deadly Coil. Ever since Shadowlands started, this was the best legendary to use. I think back in the early days of the expansion, people had it on their chest, but now that we have tier pieces in this patch, Cloak is the best spot to use it on. Deadly Coil is what's considered your single target legendary, whereas you also have Monstrosity, which is Frenzied Monstrosity, I think is the name of the legendary power. This will also increase the attack speed and damage of my Dark Transformation, that big that I spawn every minute throughout dungeon stuff. Monstrosity Drapes is gonna be my dungeon or my AoE type legendary. So those are the two legendaries I use, and I have them both. Thankfully, they both are available to be put on your cloak. Cloaks are usually one of those random pieces of gear that you're like, is it good? Is it bad? Like, but yeah. The other legendary that you can use is your Covenant's legendary, but you have to use it via the Zereth Mortis Unity power. So you get this belt in Zereth Mortis, the new zone in this patch, Unity. And what Unity does is once you build it into a legendary, it will actually use the legendary power that you have for your Covenant. And I don't know how it works when you switch Covenants, if it automatically switches or if you have to rebuild it or whatever. I've never tried. So obviously this is using the Necrolord ability. Abomination Frenzy, which makes that tentacle move that I have, Abomination Limb, it's increased. So it goes longer. It grants my Runic Corruption, which is that Runic power redemption type proc that I get. And then the first time an enemy is damaged by that ability, they take 20% increased damage for 12 seconds. So, I do have the ability to move this legendary to any other slot that I want, but I'm okay with it being on belt because once again, belts. I say cloaks, bracers, belts, and boots are those niche pieces of gear that you usually can use anything you want, really, I guess, on them. Like, if it's an eye level upgrade, it most likely has higher stats, and they're usually never, like, I don't know. Like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, they're not the ones that I, like, dive really hard for. Like, you know how everybody farms for that weapon they want, those trinkets they want. I don't do that with those 4 pieces of gear. The other ones, like helm, shoulders, chest, pants, gloves, those are all tier, so obviously those are gonna have their own spot. Um, but if you want to compare them to something else, necklaces and rings are different, in my opinion. I think necklaces and rings both play more of a pivotal role on you need to be very specific on what stats are on them. Because rings usually have, man, even necklaces have a high amount of stat. So that's usually going to make or break what you want for stats. Whereas these, I mean, crits like one of my lower stats that I use. Same thing with versatility. I want mostly mastery and some haste. But I'm already capped out on both of those. So I want to put my points or my stats to crit first now because you get to a point with your stats where if you go too far over the cap, it's just not going to benefit you anymore. That's why you'll see me wearing braces that have versatility, or I mean, these are legendary, so I can't really say much about them, but and my boots are my 2 best stats with avoidance because that's like a bonus stat that I get put on stuff. But like my necklace, I could go for a haste mastery necklace. I don't want to do that. I like having the crit on there because it provides me the extra crit that I need because I'm already capped on haste. Actually, way capped on. I don't know. I'm way capped on both masters right now. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. We went over all that stuff. Enchants, I mean, cloak enchants can be multiple different things. Stamina and leech, or stamina and movement speed are 2 of the best ones, I think. Chest enchant, primary stats is usually your go-to, but there is a shadow damage one that you can use that enhances with your shadow core oil. Bracers, Death Knights don't have a bracer enchant this expansion. Gloves, strength. Boots, agility I put on because there's not really anything else. Rings, I need to enchant the ring. Oh, guys, never forget to enchant your gear. Um, Rings, it depends on what you want for your stats. Like I said, I'm already capped on mastery and haste. To be honest, I could probably take that haste enchant off and put crit or verse on both of these. Same thing with the gems. Like I just put a crit gem in my helm because that's what I need now that I'm capped on my 2 best stats. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this little video. We ran a dungeon as an Unholy Death Knight. It went very fast, very casual. I wasn't paying attention because I was explaining everything. Sorry if you guys did not like were able to catch any of the pieces, but thankfully with YouTube videos you can rewind and rewatch. So I tried to explain the best that I could for everything. Um, I will do my. I don't know if I'm gonna be posting any more like class videos like this for the Death Knight. I might do a different class, but if you guys have any questions, please post them in the comments below and I'll try my best to answer. So thank you guys. I will catch you guys. I'm out.